So let me give you a little background about the brand. So we are a women's fashion label. We are based in Brixton. We are founded in March 2013 by me and my sister. So my sister is doing all the creative work and the design and the product sourcing. And I'm doing the boring stuff. So I'm doing the sales and the marketing and all the branding work. And we are in South London, and we do everything we do it in-house. So we design everything from scratch, and we do all the sourcing and all the development. So we do everything under one roof. And does anybody know who that is? Anybody from Greece here by any chance? No. So that is Epictetus. That is an old Greek philosopher. And he said something very wise, which is first say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. So what we did before we even started approaching foreign markets, we did some really thorough branding work to be absolutely sure of what we want to be, what product we want to convey. And then in the next step, once we felt that we are on a strong position, we would go to the foreign markets. So first of all, I think every branding work should start with the customer. So what we did, we didn't define any weird demographic group, but we wanted to design for one specific customer. So we wanted to be as precise as possible so that we actually have a face and a persona in front of us who we can actually design our product for. So we called her Freya. So Freya is 20 years old. She is rather urban. We would assume she has an academic education, and she is bohemian but still career conscious. And what we found out during the process is that a lot of people who actually were into music and festivals liked our fashion. So we are assuming that Freya is also a lover of music and arts, and her life is driven by curiosity. Because as you can see later, our styles are a bit different than mainstream. And then we asked ourselves, what archetypes would we actually be? I mean, if we were an archetype, as defined by Carl Jung, you know, these 12 archetypes, so we said that in every person around the globe, there's a different archetype or a mixture of both. We said, okay, we want to be an explorer, so we want to help people to find independence and adventure and explore something new. But also, we don't want to take us so seriously. So we want to be a bit of a jester. We want to be a bit funny. We want to be a bit playful. And we want to approach things with a bit of humor. And then we asked ourselves, we did a bit of an association game. So we asked ourselves, what would the brand be if it was different artworks, or if it was a fictional character, or a band, or a movie, or an element, which very helped us to be clearer about the brand. So this is all internal work, by the way, right? So we never would show it to a customer or to a client. It's only for us and our employees to be clearer about the brand and what we want to convey with the brand. So we want to be Dorothy Gale, for example, a bit adventurous, exploring, but still stylish in a very own way. Or we want to be an Alfa Romeo, which has this vintage aspect, but still has a bit of a quirk. And there are some more examples. So if it was a book, we would probably be Alice in Wonderland. And if it was a drink, a basil margarita, which is still classic, but still has this little quirky touch to it. And then we defined the tone of voice, because I think it's very important, if you go out there in the world, that the tone of voice has to be consistent over all your social media channels and over all the language that you operate in. So whenever we work with an outside agency or outside social media people, we always want to make sure that they be able, in their very own language, to capture our tone of voice. So in our case scenario, we want to be rather informal, a bit jokey, a bit imaginative. And the reason why we are that is because our target group, they are so tech-savvy, and they know basically everything which is out there. And we want to be a bit more cheeky and approachable to them, almost like talking to a good mate in the tone we talk to them. So I would very highly recommend to be very clear about your tone of voice before you start approaching foreign markets. Yeah, and this is then eventually how our brand translates into product. So that was actually from our very first photo shoot, which we did on the streets of Brixton. So we designed a classic tartan skirt, but we gave it a bit of an asymmetric cut, and we gave it pockets, just to make it a bit more modern and to distinguish it from other tartan skirts out there. And the same with the blouse. We called it the granny blouse because it has rather Victorian cut, but we gave it a bit of a piping and we tried to punk it up a bit for our audience. And the same with the styling. So I think she comes across as very British, but she still has this punky edge to her. And what our designer does, before she actually gives something to production, she wants to make sure that all we design can be worn with boots. So even if it's stylish evening dresses, she wants to see somebody wearing with the boots to be sure that you can punk it up if you want to. So ultimately, unfortunately, brand is not what we're saying about ourselves, but brand is what other people say about you. So you never really can 100% control your brand. However, what I do believe is brand is about trust. So you would never, ever buy something from a brand you don't trust. Likewise, you wouldn't buy anything from people you wouldn't trust, or you wouldn't take advice from somebody you wouldn't trust. And I think there's mainly, if you break it down to the core, there is two main blocks how you can create trust. And one I call internal credibility, and one I call external credibility. And internal credibility is you can achieve through making all your processes and your design process and your production process a bit more transparent. So we want to give them a behind-the-scene look, you want to say who we are, you want to say where you produce, because the whole world becomes so transparent through the internet, and people just want to know. They want to know where they buy from. They want to be educated. And so this is why we always feed them. This is a behind-the-scenes photo from our very first photo shoot. We always feed them with some of our processes and the way we do things to give them background. Does anybody know the lady with our dress down there? Have you heard of the Orange is the New Black, the American TV show? So that is the main actress, Laverne Cox. And she wore us. So that is one of our dresses from the third collection. And that obviously helps the matter as well if you get external credibility, if you get recommendations from bloggers or from celebrities or from any kind of authority out there which people like and trust. So internal credibility, which is very easy to achieve. External credibility, I mean, if you don't happen to be friends with Taylor Swift or something like that, you want to start with bloggers or you want to get into some papers because that always helps the matter. What we normally do is, before we approach a foreign market, for example, we are in Japan now, we made sure that some Japanese bloggers wore us before we even went there. Because if Japanese people start looking for us and they find something in Japanese, they will be pleasantly surprised. Yeah, and this is, I mean, I assume that most people in the audience have British fashion labels. And what we've seen in the past is especially among young buyers, and there especially among young American buyers, there was a surge in e-commerce on British e-shops. So, for example, between October and December 2015, the overseas mobile search for UK fashion went up a staggering 41%, which is amazing. So we can tell that British fashion is hip these days. And for that reason, you have to make absolutely sure that you get your Britishness across. And the problem with Britishness is, or let's say the challenge with British society and culture is, that it's very diversified. So I'm originally from Germany, and Germany is easy. I mean, we are hardworking but boring. We are reliable, but we know how to build cars. So Germany you can pinpoint in 2 or 3 sentences, right? But Britain is a very, very, very complex beast. So, for example, in Britain, British people seem to be very regarded as efficient and understated, keep calm and carry on, and they're very indirect. But on the other hand side, there is a huge vanguardism, and there is always like an innovative artist and people like, for example, David Bowie would be probably down there in this corner, right? And then Britain is very class-driven, right? You have all these private schools, and you have this royal family, and you have Oxbridge. But on the other hand side, there's a huge subculture in Britain, right? So we had this punk movement with the Sex Pistols and And we have Monty Python, and we have this hooliganism, which is from Britain originally. So Britain is full of kind of paradoxes, and it's very individual, and it's very fragmented in its outer appearance, right? For example, Vivienne Westwood, she's almost royal, and she comes along as very classy and traditional, but she also conveys this punky edge to it. She also conveys these radical, these subversive elements. I take Burberry, for example. They're very traditional, they're very vintage-inspired, but they have a strong modern drive, and they're always, if you go into the Burberry flagship store on Regent Street, you see all these big digital displays and the social media marketing, and so on. I mean, I just listed a few of them. And we decided that in terms of our Britishness, we want to be a bit subversive, we want to be a bit punky, but we always want to have a bit of a modern, innovative edge. So this is completely stolen, by the way, from Creative Semiotics, which I was on a seminar on. But I would suggest, if you want to convey your Britishness, since Britishness is so diverse and so complex, you really want to make up your mind of what kind of Britishness you want to convey actually out there in the world. And in our case scenario is, I don't know if you know, but last year was 150 years of Alice in Wonderland. So what we did is we took a modern day Alice and conveyed her into to London, and we collaborated with 12 artists and illustrators, and each of the artists and illustrators illustrated us a Alice in Wonderland scene in a modern way. And this was very well received in China, for example, because everybody knows Alice in Wonderland is quintessentially British, and they loved it. On another lookbook, we said, okay, what else is really British? I mean, what do people know there? And it's, of course, pubs, right? So we shot a whole lookbook in 12 different pubs in central London, around Fleet Street, where there are pubs which are from the 16th, 15th, even 14th century, I guess, which are so old. I mean, America didn't exist in those days, right? So people liked it. And this was actually the favorite lookbook of my American agent, because they don't have stuff like that over there. And so on. And then in the newest lookbook, which wasn't as innovative, but was still very British, we have all these red phone boxes. And we kind of designed the whole lookbook as somebody was shot by a paparazzi, and we always had this reoccurring element of red phone boxes. However you do it, you want to make sure that you really, really know what kind of Britishness you want to convey. And especially for the overseas audience, you want to get these quintessential British elements in there to actually make people aware where you're from. And people love it. I mean, British fashion is en vogue now, as we could see in the statistics. Yeah, and that's the same thing. So this is our normal logo, how we use it here and on trade shows. And overseas, we often lose it with London, because that's a different story, and it tells you right away where you're from. And it doesn't really matter where you're from in the UK. For example, I have a friend who has a shoe label, and they're from Southampton, and Southampton has this rich tradition of shoemaking. Manchester has this rich tradition of textiles. So sometimes it helps to even localize your brand further, because it gives your brand more authenticity, and it will, by seeing your logo, will tell people right away where you're from, right? Yeah, and then I want to talk a bit about online, because I think online is a total new ball game. I mean, all cards are being reshuffled. This, for example, is Versace, very well-known billion-euro business from Italy, luxury brand. And this is Tom Smart. This is a small hat maker from North London. And my point here is, if you see their websites and you don't really, you just block out the name, you wouldn't be able to tell which brand is cooler or which brand is more expensive, right? So for people who overseas who come to your website and they see something nicely designed with a bit of heritage, they say, wow, right? I mean, we would never, ever be able to compete with those guys in terms of offline marketing, right? In terms of shop fronts, or in terms of trade catwalks or whatever. But online, you can compete with them. Same with this. This is Chanel. I mean, well-known multi-billion business from France. And this is Everlane. This is a fairly new fashion company from New York who does basically basics, right? And what is worth more? I mean, I personally find this page more appealing than the Chanel page. So think about online. I mean, get it right. And the interesting thing is that a lot of purchasing decisions are based on good design. So if people come to your website and they see good design, then it's more likely that they're going to buy. So what we did is we kept it super visual. So we didn't bother putting a lot of text or info about there. So if you come to our website, I mean, what you see right away is just clothes. And the other thing we did is we made sure that you could swap with currencies. So people like to see their localized currencies. Language. So there was a survey, and then almost 60% of the people said that language information was more important than price. So if they get something in their own language and explain something in their own language, they are likely to buy, and the price is only second important to that. Obviously, you want to translate wisely. So that's what you see here actually really happened, and that was one of the biggest marketing lapses in the history of marketing. So Pepsi was so clever to, I don't know how they translated, that was actually before the days of Google Translate, but they got it totally wrong. So they had this nice slogan, Pepsi brings you back to life in America, which worked really well. Translated into Mandarin, and boom, it was something like, Pepsi brings your ancestor back from the grave. Very wrong. So if you translate, especially if you translate languages where you don't have a clue about, you really want to get it right and professional advice. And the UKTI is, by the way, very helpful when it comes to that. And this is what we did. We didn't translate the whole website yet because of a scarcity of resources. However, what we did do is we got a translator and translated our brand story. So this is basically the story about Alice's pig, and we signed it with Amanda and Nico to make it a bit more personal. And we sent it out with our lookbooks, and boom, we now have an agent in Tokyo, because they really liked that approach, right? They could make sense of it, and they also valued the fact that you did an effort to talk in their language to them. And you obviously want to know your audience. Does anybody know what that is? That is New York. Yeah. So that was actually print advertising by WWF, this world-renowned wildlife organization. And they said, okay, that they wanted to make people aware that the tsunami killed 100 times more people than 9/11. And so they created this New York skyline photo with thousands of planes actually attacking them at the same time. And it worked really well in Brazil. So they got a good uprise and brand awareness in Brazil for that, because it was done by their Brazilian advertising agency. However, in America, there was a big backlash. They didn't like it. They said, no, you want to be more sensitive with that. And it's actually pushed them down there. And all the donations for them went down for a while. So what I'm saying here is that you really want to do your research about how you spin your advertising campaigns in foreign markets. And the worst thing that can happen is something like that you hurt somebody's feelings. Yeah, that was pretty much how we built the brand, and my main recommendations on how to adapt it to foreign markets. And the last things I want to say is that, I mean, that's at least us, but I believe that you always have to deviate a bit from the norm to make good progress. And so what I always suggest is people to be a bit experimental with what they're doing. And some people are so cautious around everything that they don't try to do anything new because they said, oh, we could hurt our brand image. But the thing is, I believe that most of the people in the audience are actually probably have brands which are not Adidas or Versace yet. So I would always be a bit creative and be a bit wild in the approach you do things. And we always say, at least within Alice's Pick, that we want to be a bit crappy and always try things, and some work and some doesn't. But the main thing is, I think, for branding as an experiment, that you always do. And at the end, you see what sticks and what doesn't. So those are my key points I want everybody to remember, is that I think before you approach any foreign market, Be clear of who you want to be. Do really thorough branding exercises. Be globally consistent, but locally and culturally relevant. So what I mean is that the what, I mean your brand image and your fonts and what you stand for, is always has to be consistent over the world. Otherwise, people get confused. However, the how obviously varies. How you present it, or through what marketing campaigns, or what image material that you can localize, and people will appreciate that. Obviously, be clear and visual. And as I told you, I mean, internet is a new ball game, so you want to be really, you don't want to save money on graphic design. I mean, that is the worst you can do, because you have basically, how many internet users are in the world? 3 billion or something. So that's potentially your audience, right? Everybody with a MacBook with a computer and an internet access can go on your site. You never know who goes on there, so make sure that they have a nice, welcoming, well-designed site. Translate wisely, and I always think you should keep on experimenting, because, as I say, you don't create a brand, you build a brand.